I'm Paul Vanderwater. I'm chair of the board of the National Academy of Social Insurance. And on behalf of the board and the Academy, I'm pleased to welcome you this morning to our policy summit, which represents a restart of our long tradition of annual policy conferences, which was interrupted during the pandemic and in recent years. With our name, National Academy of Social Insurance, people often ask, well, what does social insurance encompass? Obviously, the traditional contributory programs like Social Security, Medicare, unemployment compensation, workers' compensation. But we also say that our mandate covers what we call related programs, which brings in complementary programs such as SSI, providing income for persons with disabilities and low-income seniors, Medicaid, of course, which has become incredibly important as a source of coverage. So you'll find these different issues and programs fitting into our conference today. You'll hear not just about a fascinating new survey about public opinion on Social Security, but about Medicare, Medicaid, the role of artificial intelligence in benefit administration, and finally, at the end of the day, a discussion of tax policy, which is, of course, critical to everything else, because without sufficient funding, all of our programs, would be challenged. So again, we have what I think is a fascinating program today. I'm pleased to see all of you here, and I'm looking forward to the day's activities. Oh, and of course, last but absolutely not least, I'd like to introduce our new Chief Executive Officer, Rebecca Vallas.
Thank you so much, Paul. Good morning, beautiful Academy community. How's everyone feeling today? I mean, I know there's a lot going on, but come on, this is a really great group of people. How are we doing today? Okay, it's a little better. So there's caffeine in the back. It was so wonderful to be with so many of you last night for the reception. It's so wonderful to see so many members here, so many new members, and so many friends of the Academy. And I have to say, a lot of us were saying last night at the reception, it feels like times like this, community is even more important. And so being in person and being in space with so many of you today, it feels really special. As Paul mentioned, this is the first time the Academy has done an in-person policy conference in 6 years. That's kind of extraordinary to think, but it's just really, truly special to have the return of that event happening today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rebecca Vallas. As Paul said, I am the new CEO of the National Academy of Social Insurance. I consider that a great honor and a great privilege. And today's policy summit is truly jam-packed. So we have a lot on deck for you, as you can see from the program, but we're really, really excited about every part of this agenda. And conversations like the ones that we're going to be having today are always important, but many of them are especially timely in the current political climate. So what we're going to be endeavoring to do today, just to give you a little bit of level setting, is to situate ourselves in the current moment and to get informed about current debates, of which there are no shortage, threats, where they exist, opportunities, but also we're going to be endeavoring to keep hold of a North Star vision that transcends any one Congress or four-year presidential administration. And we're going to be helped in doing that by a truly all-star lineup of speakers, some of the nation's leading experts from nearly every corner of the social insurance ecosystem, and many of which are members of the Academy, new members of the Academy who we welcomed just yesterday, and board members and friends as well. We're going to be hearing about long-term care, one of the most pressing challenges of our time, which also has some really exciting innovations afoot in the states. We'll hear about the state of play for Medicare and Medicaid as we prepare to mark their 60th anniversary this year, and as Medicaid faces existential threats in in the current climate. We'll hear about AI and benefits, which is an emerging set of issues and considerations that none of us who work on benefits can afford to ignore, even if we feel not quite like AI experts, myself included. We'll hear about the upcoming tax debate and what it means for social insurance, and we'll be inspired and pushed to think big by a series of lightning talks from some phenomenal thinkers. And to kick all of this off, we're going to be starting the day with a release of hot off the presses public opinion research exploring what Americans want for the future of Social Security. And this is a really important time to be having this conversation, both because the program is marking its 90th anniversary this year, but also because, as no one in this room will be surprised to be reminded, the program faces a long-term financing gap that will need to be addressed in the coming years to avoid the potential of across-the-board benefit cuts that no one wants to see happen. So the Academy was absolutely thrilled to partner with AARP, the National Institute for Retirement Security, the Chamber of Commerce, and also Greenwald Research to take this polling effort throughout last year. It picks up the thread of similar work that folks may remember the Academy doing 10 years ago. It's hard to believe that was 10 years ago, asking the American people, what do they want for the future of Social Security? And so I'm going to go ahead and call up our first panel of the day, which is going to be Matt Greenwald. We're so fortunate to be joined by Matt, who's going to be walking us through the findings. And I'm also going to go ahead and ask Tyler Bond from the National Institute of Retirement Security, Joel Eskovitz from AARP, and Chantel Sheaks from the Chamber of Commerce to go ahead and get seated up here so that we can be ready to get into discussion about the findings. I'll note that we've just released them this morning, so you guys are the first people to be hearing about the findings from this poll. And you can find the full report at the Academy's website, nasi.org. And I believe we also have executive summaries being distributed too. So without further ado, let's get into it. And Matt, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. This has been a long research journey, and it's exciting to be at this point of being able to provide the results of the journey. Greenwald Research is a nonpartisan market research company. I suspect I'm here because our company does a lot of product development work in the private sector, and as part of that, we do a lot of trade-off analysis. We did work for the Academy in 2012 and 2014. So you have come my colleagues on that one, with surveys on Social Security with a trade-off analysis. So in a sense, this is the third one. I will be terse because I see my role as trying to provide as much the important findings to you in a short period of time to allow time for discussion. However, I will read some of the questions because question wording in some of this is important. We worked very hard to try to get language that people could understand, but also was objective and didn't try to push people one way or another. To try to deliver on that, after all the work we did on the questionnaire, we tested the questionnaire in cognitive interviews where we had people read the questions, tell us what it meant to them, tell us if they understood it, and if they didn't, work with them and try to find different language that would get them to understand. We did other things as well. So with that, I will see if I can work this and first start off by telling you more precisely what we did. In fact, we surveyed online 2,243 Americans ages 21 above. We did the trade-off analysis, and I'll get more to that later, and try to describe it a little bit. We used the NORC AmeriSpeak panel, which is one of the nation's best panels in this probability-based sample, as opposed to a lot of the other panel companies that have opt-in. So this is really one of the premier panel companies. We offered the questionnaire in English and Spanish. We had 4 oversamples, 306 Hispanics, 265 non-Hispanic African Americans, 296 non-Hispanic Asian American Pacific Islanders, and 153 small business owners. And then we weighted the sample very detailed by age, gender, census division, and other things, so it represents the population overall. The sampling error is plus or minus 2.1%. Okay. As a prelude to getting into people's reaction to the policy options, I think it's important to describe how important Social Security is to them. I think these are key findings. And we find, when we ask people, how important would you say Social Security retirement benefits are to you? And these are people who are retired and receiving benefits. 4 and 5, 83% say very important. 1% says not at all important. 1% says not too important. So clearly, very important. When we ask what people who are not getting benefits expect, how important Social Security will be to them, people, and we've done other work, people tend to underestimate how important Social Security will be for various and sundry reasons. But even with that, 52% expected to be very important, 29% somewhat important, 4% not at all important. Even households with incomes above $200,000 a year, only 7% of those say Social Security will not at all be not at all important to them. So across the board. Now, for all people, we asked which one of these statements best describes their situation. I would not be able to afford the basics, such as food, clothing, or shelter, if not for Social Security. Over a third of Americans say that. Even the working people, even including working people, tend to underestimate. 30% choose I would have to make significant sacrifices but could still afford the basics. And only about a quarter say my budget would be tighter, but I would get by. Even among households with incomes above $200,000, only 18% say the absence of Social Security would have no effect. We also asked questions about disability insurance. How important do you think Social Security disability benefits would be to your monthly income if you became disabled and were unable to support yourself through work? We asked this only of people who are working full-time or part-time, and you see that 7 in 10 say very important, 19% say somewhat important, 2% say not at all important, and another 4% say not too important. So only 6% say not too little important. You may see in the bottom right, we indicate statistically significant differences. If it says a T, it says significantly different than the total. D says significantly different than Democrats are, different than Republicans are than Democrats. And you see that basically across the board, across the political spectrum, disability insurance is expected to be very important, fairly equally. It doesn't affect Democrats different than Republicans. Now, we asked which one of these 3 statements below comes closest to your viewpoint. One of 3. We should ensure Social Security benefits are not reduced, even if it means raising taxes on some or all Americans. And just about half the country, 53%, say that comes closest. Democrats a little more than Republicans, but 52% of Republicans choose that one. We should increase Social Security benefits, even if it means raising taxes on some or all Americans. 30% adhere to that. So if you're adding us 85% who think we should at least keep benefits the same, even if it means raising taxes on some or all Americans, and 15% say we shouldn't raise taxes on any American, even if it means reducing Social Security benefits. Republicans are more likely to say that than the others, but only 24% of Republicans choose that one statement. Now, I want to get into trade-off analysis. I'd like to give you a background because my assumption is that many people are not that familiar with trade-off analysis. Trade-off analysis was invented over a half century ago by University of Pennsylvania marketing professor Paul Green. He based it on Bayesian math, Thomas Bayes, and he was supplemented by the work of mathematical psychologists and an econometrician. And it was observed soon after conjoint analysis was developed. Trade-off analysis and conjoint analysis, basically the same thing. I'm using the words interchangeably. Conjoint analysis quickly became the most broadly used and powerful survey-based technique for measuring and predicting consumer preference. And let me say just very briefly why that is. It solved the problem for, well, maybe more especially in the private sector. Private sector companies are very preoccupied with market share. They want to sell as much of their product as they can. But how do you design the best product? So just picture for a moment someone in the luxury car business, and they're competing with Lexus and Mercedes and BMW, and they want the car that people would prefer over those other brands. Now they have to make decisions. How powerful the engine, how good the interior, how good the sound system, how good the warranty program, et cetera, et cetera. There are probably well over 1,000 different combinations. You can't ask people which of 1,000 different options are best. What trade-off analysis does is enable you to ask a reasonable number of questions and discern which one of all the combinations is preferred. And not only that, it can tell you the impact of each option on preference for the whole. So is it worth it to have leather seats and raise the cost by $200? The conjoint trade-off analysis helps you do that. So the way it does it is it measures preferences and strengths of preferences by having survey respondents make a series of carefully designed choices. And just to illustrate that too, if I asked you, what would you prefer for lunch? A hamburger, fries, salad, Coke and cherry pie for $12? Or a hot dog, fries, salad, cherry pie, and Coke for $12? It's pretty easy for me to discern if you like a hamburger or a hot dog better. If you like a hamburger better and I ask you, what would you prefer, a hamburger, fries, salad, Coke, cherry pie for $35, or a hot dog, fries, salad, cherry pie, Coke for $12, it won't take me that many questions to find out how much more you're willing to pay for a hamburger. That's basically the way it works. In this study, respondents made 12 choices, each between 3 packages of policy options, and for each package, they were informed of the impact of the policy options, the package, on the financing gap. I think that's very important. They were informed if it would raise or decrease the financing gap, and in every case, one of the packages was no change at all. And with no change, the financing gap would be 20% in 2035. And with this analysis, we were able to discern which package is preferred of all the multitude of choices, by how many respondents, and the impact of each policy option on overall preferences. And we tested 9 types of policy options. For changing the taxable earnings gap, we tested 6 options. Lift the cap completely, raise it to $350,000, keep it at about 168, and start it again at 400,000, the donor hole. And for each of those 3 choices, we gave them 2 options. One is give people higher benefits based on the increased taxes they pay, or they get no benefit increase at all based on those taxes. So each of the 3 had 2. We gave them 2 tax rate options, raised it to 7.2% for employers and the same for employees, raised it to 8.2%. 2 changes in retirement benefits, the age for entitlement to full benefits, raising it to 68 or 69. 2 cost of living adjustment options, raise it or lower it. A work credit for parents or caregivers, increasing benefits for all beneficiaries, give everyone coming into the system, not for current recipients, but coming in, extra $250. Lift the taxation on benefits either completely, or for those on income above $50,000 for individuals and $100,000 for a couple. Provide a bridge benefit for people who do physically hard work or can't work because of disability. They still would get a reduced benefit if they claim benefits before the age of full entitlement, but it would be less, and reduce benefits for higher earners. For all options, we also gave them no change from the current system. And all these policies have been recommended, and that's why they were scored by the Social Security Administration, and the impact on the financing gap was based on the Social Security Administration scoring. So, the three most important things we learned. First, what is the preferred package? How do Americans want Social Security changed? And of course, one of the options is don't change it at all. This is what they said, and this is an order of importance to them, which we measured. Most important, keep the current cap at about $168,000 and also collect Social Security taxes on earnings above $400,000, and those who are in more than $400,000 would not get any additional benefits for their additional contribution. Increase the tax rate from 6.2% to 7.2%, not 8.2%, 7. Age of full retirement benefits, age of entitlement, keep it at 67. Increase the cost of living adjustment. Give parents who are caregivers for children under 6 credit for work. Don't give everyone coming into the system an extra $250. Don't do that. Don't lift taxes on Social Security benefits. Provide a bridge benefit for people who do physically hard work, and reduce benefits for higher earners. And let me say, this is an order of preference. The last one had a hardly discernible impact. We even discussed whether to include it, but it was enough, it was discernible, so we put it in, but that had the least impact on overall preferences. This package was preferred to the current system by 82%. Given that choice, current system, which has a financing gap of 20%, or this one, and I should add, this one closes the financing gap completely and provides a 1% surplus. Again, closes the financing gap, the preferred package closes the financing gap completely, gives a surplus. 82%, not that much different by educational level, not that different by household income. Democrats, 88%, Republicans, 74%. But still, Republicans, 74%. Not really a clear pattern by age. I guess you could say it sort of tends to be more supported as it goes older, but 50 to 64-year-olds are the difference. And last one on this, I want to tell you what specific policy options were most impactful in increasing support of our overall package and which decreased the package enough. In the report, you can see how each policy option affects it, but the things that increased support the most was applying the payroll tax on earnings above $400,000, which of course was chosen over the other 5. Gradually increase the Social Security tax rate to 7.2% and keep the retirement age of 67 instead of raising it. You know, we see beneath all these findings, the goal is to reduce the financing gap. People don't want, and I think it's clear, it's important to them, they don't want benefits cut. But even though increasing the age to 67 would help decrease the financing gap, that was rejected. The things that would decreased appeal was not changing the tax gap, because that didn't address the financing gap. To decrease the cost of living adjustment by basing on a different evaluation, to increase benefits for $250 a month for all beneficiaries, more about this later, but that increased the financing gap, and increasing the full retirement age to 69. Raising it to 68 was more acceptable, although still a negative. Now, that was the key findings of the trade-off analysis, but we also actually asked first about specific policy options. And let me find what we read to people before this section. So we asked about the importance of Social Security first, and then we paused, and this was also before the trade-off analysis, and they read this. If Social Security no longer drops the advancer, Social Security no longer has enough money to pay planned Social Security benefits. The difference in the amount that it can pay and scheduled benefits is referred to as a financing gap. If Congress fails to act by 2034, it is projected that the system would only be able to pay about 80% of scheduled benefits beyond that date and would have a financing gap of about 20%. This means payments to retirees and disabled workers would be cut by about 20%. There were a lot of proposals to reform Social Security, proposals to increase Social Security taxes or decrease Social Security benefits would reduce the financing gap and improve Social Security's ability to pay scheduled benefits. Proposals to increase benefits or reduce Social Security taxes would increase the financing gap. Policymakers would likely combine several reform proposals into one package. And we asked about specific policy options in 3 categories: raise revenues, reduce benefits, increase benefits. And we rotated that so people got them in different order. So, with that introduction, let me give you some of the key findings here. Currently, all workers, and this is what they read, currently all workers pay Social Security taxes on their wages up to about $168,000. Any wage earned above $168,000 per year are not taxed by Social Security. This proposal would maintain the current cap at about $168,000, but have Americans with annual wages above that start paying Social Security taxes again on wages above that amount. 2/3 favor that. Only 1 in 5 is opposed. Strong majorities of Republicans and Democrats support this. It's favored by 79%, surprisingly, of people with incomes above $200,000. The people most likely to be subject to it favor it the most. Now, of course, we didn't divide between 200,000 and 400,000, so all the support could be under 400,000, but of course, people with incomes of 200,000 are closer to it. Oops, right. Okay. Proposal to increase the tax cap. Workers currently pay 6.2% of their wages to Social Security, and their employers pay the same share for a total of 12.4%. This proposal would greatly raise the tax rate until it hits 7.2% for workers and the same for employers. Do you favor or oppose? 20% favored strongly, 38% favored somewhat. So overall, 57% favor this, including 51% of Republicans, 64% of Democrats. That's statistically significant than everyone else. It's opposed strongly by 11% and opposed somewhat by 18%. So overall, 28% oppose this and 57% favor it. A new area, which we didn't test in 2014, some proposals would improve Social Security's finances by rerouting funds from other sources of federal tax revenues. Do you believe that rerouting funds from other sources of federal tax revenues should be used to fund Social Security? And 2/3 say it should. Not that different by education, not that different by outcome, not that different really from party affiliation, although Democrats 69% agree and Republicans 63%, increases with age. So pretty high support. And then we asked them, and I'm not showing you the data here, but we asked them, well, which specific taxes should it come from? In order of preference, most preferred estate taxes, second, general revenues, third, carbon taxes, fourth, capital gains, and the least, in a small proportion, tax on employee benefits. Oops. Okay. Then we asked a question about benefit reductions. Currently, the age required to get Social Security retirement benefits is 67. People can claim benefits, can claim reduced benefits as early as 62. Under this proposal, the age required to get full Social Security retirement benefits would be increased to 68. People who can still claim as early as 62, but their benefits would be reduced from the current level no matter what age they claim benefits because of the higher age of because of the higher age required to receive unreduced benefits. To receive the same amount of benefits available today, a person would need to work an additional year to claim benefits. Do you favor or oppose this? And remember, we told them that this type of thing would reduce the financing gap. 37% favor raising the age of full entitlements to benefits, and 48% oppose it. Only 9% strongly favor raising the age. Now we saw in the trade-off analysis, this is something that people are strongly opposed to. When we ask people about gradually slowing down the cost of living adjustments, you see that 47% oppose this and 38% favor it. And this was, in the trade-off analysis, we found that there was a preference for increasing the cost of living adjustments. Proposal to reduce benefits to those earning higher earnings than Social Security. 41% favor it and 43% oppose it. I said that in the trade-off analysis, it was barely discernible the preference to reduce benefits, and obviously because the trade-off, to use a word, reduce benefits improves the financing gap, reduces it. But people were drawn to it for that, but opposed to it because they don't like the idea of cutting benefits. Views on improving benefits. Proposal to provide credit for parents who earn little or nothing raising a child under 6. 58% favor this, and 27% oppose this. Twice as many favor as oppose. Reducing the penalty of claiming early for those in physically demanding jobs. Well more than twice as many favor the 61% as oppose. Raising the cost of living adjustment based on the spending patterns of older Americans. 64% favor this, only 18% oppose. 18% are not sure. Only 4% oppose that strongly. And feelings on increasing the level of Social Security disability benefits. About half think it should be higher, 38% think it's about right, and only 4% think it should be lower. The people, the Democrats at 58% are much more likely than Republicans to think that it should be raised. And proposals to reform Social Security's SSI savings limits. I think it would be useful to read that question. SSI beneficiaries are not allowed to have more than $2,000 in savings or other resources, $3,000 for married couples. Exceeding this savings limit causes people to lose their benefits. Proposals have been made to reform these savings limits. Which one of the following proposals would you most support? And 1 in 5 say eliminate the limit on savings. Same across the board. 18% say increase the savings limit to $10,000 for an individual and $20,000 for a couple. And 28%, the plurality, say increase the savings limit to $10,000 for an individual and $20,000 for a couple, and exempt some or all retirement savings, such as 401ks, from the limits. 20%, but it's 35% for Democrats. Only 10% say none of these, say none of the increases in the savings limit, and 23% are not sure. And finally, SSI provides lower benefits for a married couple than it does for two individuals living together and both receiving SSI who are not married. A proposal has been made to change this so that SSI beneficiaries can marry without a reduction in benefits, and 71% favor this. Pretty close between the Democrats and Republicans, although Democrats are 77% are statistically more likely to favor it than Republicans, and only 12% are opposed to this. So I have given you a quick tour of the findings, and now I turn it over back to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was just a heroic navigation of so much information. You managed to pack so much in there. So thank you, thank you. I feel very far away from you guys. I think I'm going to come get a little closer. I don't think Tyler will bite, right? He had breakfast, he says. It's good to hear. So, Matt, thank you so much for all of that. And also just thank you to Greenwald for working on this with us. And just a huge thank you in particular to AARP for making this work possible, and also the Retirement Research Foundation. So that was a lot. So I'm going to ask you guys to stay with us a little bit, but what we're going to do here is, since we've just given you a ton of data, we're going to try and pull some of the threads out of this and say, so what are the takeaways from this? And to help me do that, we have our polling partners from AARP, from the Chamber of Commerce, and from the National Institute of Retirement Security here to do a little bit of sharing some of their key takeaways. And then we're going to be joined by a panel to follow that, who's going to help put this in context and ask the question, so what is the message to policymakers here? And how does this polling inform the current Social Security debate? So to do that, Joel, I'm going to put you on the spot first. AARP really, this project was a brainchild of ours and AARP's, really bringing back this work that was done in 2014. And I'm sort of looking at this table in the front here of some of the people who did the work 10 years ago, and they're hearing the findings this time around. We, I think, talking about doing this, we're saying, it feels like a lot of the time Social Security is talked about like it's a math problem or a budget problem, right? And we sort of lose the thread in those debates of, well, what is it that people want? Because this program is really about people. What is your key takeaway, if you had to pick one, from the amount of findings that have come from this particular survey?
Well, I think what's interesting to me is, the tax cap, the tax max has always been something that has polled well in terms of reforming it. I think people generally find that to be unfair. And so I expected that there would be a lot of response there, that people would want to lift it, or in this case, the donut hole, which I look back at the 2014 survey, we did not ask that question. That's more of a recent proposal. But the tax rate, I thought, was an interesting response, because it wasn't just that people were willing to let middle and upper income folks pay more, but they were willing to put more of their hard-earned money into the system. And again, this isn't like, your takeaway could be that everyone loves taxes, which I think would probably be the wrong takeaway. The takeaway is, when faced with a binary choice, lower benefits or contributing a bit more, people will contribute more. They won't contribute, as Matt went through, they won't contribute 8.2%, they'll contribute 7.2%. And there are limitations, and what's so great about the trade-off analysis is it gets to show you where that line is for people. But they are willing to pay more themselves, and they're willing to also add common sense changes to the program, caregiving credit, a bridge benefit, but not just a handout like the $250 for all new beneficiaries. They wanted a rationale for why they would give additional benefits to people.
Well, thank you for that. And Tyler, same question to you. If you had to pick one, what do you see as your key or top takeaway from this particular survey at NERS?
Well, I think building off of what Joel said, people really don't want benefit cuts. Like, I think looking across the results of the trade-off analysis and the regular survey questions we asked, it's very clear that people do not want indiscriminate across the board benefit cuts. And so they're willing, as Joel pointed out, to pay more themselves to shore up the financing, close that financing gap, to prevent indiscriminate benefit cuts from occurring. And given the other findings in the survey about the importance of Social Security for not just current beneficiaries, but for future beneficiaries, I think that explains why they are so strongly opposed to benefit cuts.
And Chantel, same question to you. And of all the folks that we've been working with on this, the Chamber of Commerce has been a newer partner for the Academy and a newer partner on Social Security work. So I can imagine some people are going, wow, what an interesting set of folks working together on these issues. What's your top takeaway if you had to pick one from your perspective at the Chamber representing employers?
Well, I can't pick one. So I'll limit it just to two. One thing that we didn't have in here, and Rebecca may get into this, and sorry if you're going to say this, but we had a lot of other demographics that we just couldn't fit into this particular presentation. One of them was actually small employers, and we'd asked to have that in there. And it was because a lot of times we don't want the onus on small employers because we do know that this is equal, but the 7.2 is on employers and employees. But we pretty much saw the small employers were fitting in along with what you saw here. So I thought that was actually very helpful. And then the other one that for me personally, as an ERISA attorney by training, we have heard some proposals of kind of, I won't say gutting, but getting rid of or significantly curtailing the private sector retirement system. And when they were asked, I was really happy to say only 16% thought that might be an avenue to go down. And it makes me really think that we here need to start thinking about it differently because Americans think about it differently. They think about it, I have one pool of money. They're not really thinking, I have this pool of money, I have that pool of money. This is my retirement benefit. And Social Security is the foundation of it. And then it's built upon by defined benefit plans, defined contribution plans, IRAs. And so that one, I'm going to use that bullet point all the time.
Well, thank you for that. And also, Chantel, I appreciate you saying what you just said, which is, and we probably should have said this up front, this is just a handful of the findings. There's so much in there. And as is usually the case with this type of polling, there ends up being far more than you can put in any one presentation or in any one report. And so we look forward to continuing to work with all of you throughout this year to continue to tell this story and to cut into these findings. And so, Chantel, I look forward to working with you to uplift that small business story and to keep looking at those different cuts. Joel, I'm curious if there was anything that was surprising to you in these findings. Was there anything that jumped out and you went, wow, I really didn't expect that until you saw the results?
Well, I mean, I guess I thought people would, on the idea of not cutting benefits, this is still true. They're not cutting benefits when you give on the tax max, when you're asking people to contribute more. I thought that they would also credit them with additional money. But because in the trade-off analysis, the score shows you that is, you get more money back in terms of closing the financing gap, that piece of it. Plus the idea that they picked the donut hole over scrapping the cap, that was an interesting little wrinkle. And maybe because we in this room know that they're largely the same, by the donut hole closes by 2048 roughly. So, the score is not that different. So maybe when people are looking at it, they don't see that big of a distinction. But I did find that interesting that people found 400,000 to be a different line of demarcation than 250,000, or even, you know, the 350,000, just for your edification, that's roughly 90% of all wage earnings. We tried to break it down into a simple way. A lot of these things we tried to explain with kind of simple numbers, because this can get really wonky really fast. But yeah, the tax max stuff was interesting to see kind of how they prioritized each option.
Yeah, it's a great point, and also one that I think is important to clarify, because there were obviously a lot of slides there, and you all are dutifully paying attention to lots of findings. And there were several versions of reforming the tax cap that were asked about, as Matt mentioned, and people were very strongly in favor of one in particular, right? And so, Joel, to emphasize what you just said, it was the version that was the $400,000, so the donut hole, and eliminating the cap for over incomes $400,000 and higher, and not giving people additional benefits for their additional contributions. So a really interesting finding there.
I could add on to
please.
that. I think one thing that did surprise me, and I think it goes in line with this, was when we asked for one of the questions that we put in was, do you want a $250 across the board increase on everyone? And that was one that was pretty much rejected. And that one was kind of a surprise to me. And I think that will also be helpful with policymakers, is that there are proposals out there, you know, to increase, and that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing a very narrow, targeted increases that you know Tyler can talk about, but that one really hit me, because I thought people was like, sure, I'll take more money.
Tyler, anything that surprised you in particular?
Well, I will just jump on that and say, I don't know if it surprised me, but I was really pleased to see that there was such strong support for providing a caregiver credit, both in the trade-off analysis and in the regular survey question, because I think that's an area where both there should be recognition that that kind of work matters, and that people, and we know it would predominantly be women, who take time out of the workforce to raise young children, do need some sort of compensation for their economic security for doing that largely unpaid work. But also, I think it's a potential area of bipartisan collaboration, because I think there is interest on both sides of the political divide right now on helping caregivers, helping young families. For some people on the right, and Vice President Vance, I think, is one of them, there's a strong interest in getting people to have more children, right? But you need to provide some economic support if you're going to try to do that. This is obviously one small, very targeted way, but it is a step in that direction.
And also a statement of whether we value caregiving and care work, right, itself. Yeah, Joel.
I just want to note too, because this is a question we've gotten a fair amount when we've been going through this, is we were only using scored proposals. So as much as we wanted to include a caregiver credit that also covered care for disabled family members and for older family members, that right now is not a proposal that has been scored. And if you have ideas about how to administer such a credit, please see me after, because that's something obviously we would really be interested in doing. But yeah, I mean, obviously that is something that I think Americans were interested in providing. This would give you, it would replace years of zeros with kind of the average wage.
A great point, Joel, and one I'm glad you made. So see Joel after class if you can help solve that problem, and one that we at the Academy are very interested in seeing addressed. And just as we kind of close out this initial reactions conversation, Joel, I also want to give you a chance to talk briefly about whether you were surprised to see such strong support, and in particular, such bipartisan support for the idea of the bridge benefit.
Well, I guess I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I think it speaks to, you know, what I really like about the survey was that it gives people all of the context. I think there's a lot of polls out there that will just ask people, would you pay more in taxes for this, or would you want to see more, you know, benefits for that? But this gives people a lot more context and education. So already people are coming to that with the understanding that a raise in the retirement age is a benefit cut for those that can't make it that far. And so by the time you've gotten to the question about the bridge benefit, you've already understood the idea that, there are people who are barely making it to 62. And so for those people, we do need to come up with some sort of a way to make that penalty a little bit less severe. And so I was pleased by that, but in the context of everything else, it made sense to me because I think people are fairly empathetic toward, fairness in general, and I think that's probably something we'll speak to on the next panel as well. But
now, Tyler, I'm going to give you the last word. You are often very good. I think of you as someone who's often very good at summing things up in just a sentence or two. And we were actually having some conversations about how do you sum all of this up to have kind of a sentence or two that is the top takeaway. How would you sum up what you see as the key finding from this survey?
So I'm going to make a shameless plug on the way to answering your question, which is earlier this week, we released a History of Social Security polling project. Our fantastic Academy intern, Jacob, who's over there, helped us a lot last summer in doing that research. This very much fits within what we've seen more than 4 decades of polling indicate, which is Social Security is important. Americans really value Social Security. They want to see the program succeed. They support more money going into the system. So I think when I look at this, especially at the preferred package that you're seeing on the screen right now, people, like I said, they really don't want benefit cuts. They're willing to pay more themselves to do it, and they're willing to make hard trade-offs, right? We talked about they don't want broad across the board benefit increases. They don't want indiscriminate benefit cuts. When push comes to shove, they will make small benefit cuts for those higher earners. The one that Matt said, was negligible in terms of whether it moved support for the package or not. And I think they didn't want to do any benefit cuts, but that one change was enough to fully close the gap and give that 1% surplus. And so when they looked at it and they had to make a trade-off, they said, okay, we can accept that very targeted benefit cut in order to shore up the program as a whole.
Thank you so much. So please join me in thanking our panelists and our pollster. That was a lot that we just went through. So we're gonna make a little bit of a stage change, and while we do that, we're gonna hear from a Social Security beneficiary named Elizabeth, and with big thanks to AARP, who did a series of interviews with their members asking what Social Security means to them. So if we can cue up Elizabeth and hear from her while we bring up our next panel.
It gave me an opportunity to know that I had a safety net, and I'm very, very thankful to the president that devised the Social Security system, and I hope that it stays because there's so many individuals that need it. I have kind of geared my lifestyle living alone to that Social Security and the pension, and even though I've for all these years not worried, this year, with all the talk of Social Security being eliminated or cut back, I'm very concerned. There's always another option, but it would hurt so many people. Why would you be giving less Social Security to senior citizens, people that have paid their money into the system? And right now, we're looking at wealthy individuals, millionaires, billionaires, getting increase in all kinds of pay. And you're going to take the little bit of money that I get from Social Security and make it less? I just think that's not fair at all. Social Security is one of the most dependable things that we have. Cost of living increase, the government realizes, well, we're giving everybody else raises. Let's give senior citizens a raise that have been getting this. So that's great that somebody thought about us. Social Security is so important to older Americans because they don't know when or where at what time that they're no longer going to be on this physical plane. And they want to do what they can while they can. if the big guys at the top could just understand what a lot of us go through, maybe they wouldn't be so harsh in jumping to cut benefits and that type of thing. They had been on time since 1962, and they're getting ready to pay me again next week. On time. So they're together. They have their act together. If I was kicked out of the Social Security program right now, that would mean a lot because I really depend on it. And I'm thankful that it's there. And I really hope Congress does not have the mentality that they think they are so great that that's not needed, that they can mess with people and their earnings, that they something they paid into, that they deserve every bit of it and more.